you as well. ACOG represents 4,000 OBGYNs in New York and over 50,000 nationally. This year, ACOG on a national level has come out for choice issues like they've never come before. We are in almost every state's editorial combating some of the regressive reproductive health laws that have gone out throughout the state. So thank you for making Reproductive Health Act a priority in New York. We had our annual lobby day a few weeks ago, and I know that our physicians were up, and this was one of their priorities. They can speak passionately about this bill, and they do often. So thank you again for meeting with them a few weeks ago, as well as continuing with this fight. And I just have a statement that I like to read. Women's reproductive health is under siege. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists supports legislation which would protect a woman's private and personal decision about when and whether to have a child. The Reproductive Health Act, or RHA, modernizes and updates current New York law. RHA simply reaffirms New York State's commitment to protect and respect women's health and the right for women to make private reproductive health care decisions no matter what happens in the Supreme Court. In addition, RHA does nothing to change a woman's fundamental right to control her own reproductive health and ensures that she will be able to have an abortion if her health is endangered at any point in her pregnancy. RHA protects a woman's private and personal decision about when or whether to have a child, as stated previously. RHA modernizes and updates current New York state law. RHA treats the regulation of abortion as an issue of public health and medical practice instead of a criminal issue, and guarantees every woman the right to use or refuse contraceptives. RHA provides for a very narrow definition of fetal viability, so there is no confusion as to when an abortion can and cannot occur. In particular, RHA provides for a health exception in addition to the current life statutory exception. Therefore, this legislation would allow for an abortion to be performed at any time during the course of a pregnancy if such termination is necessary in order to protect the health of the mother. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists continues to affirm the legal rights of all women to obtain a safe and legal abortion and have access to reproductive health services. ACOG continues to support timely access to reproductive health services and medications, including daily contraceptives and emergency contraception. Our commitment to women's health means we're committed to providing our patients with needed medical care and accurate information. Across the nation, state governments are inserting themselves into patient-physician relationship with no insight or knowledge of specific situational details and no ability to resolve difficult human conditions. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists works tirelessly on both the state and federal level to combat ill-conceived legislation intended to erode women's reproductive rights. ACOG is an advocate for women's health and is committed to reversing this ominous trend. We maintain our position and decisions about individual medical care are best made between the patient and his or her physician. Lawmakers should not be taking it upon themselves to define, mandate, or prohibit medical procedures or to require doctors in any way, especially inaccurate information off a government script to their patients. Politicians should not be legislating the practice of medicine or the doctor-patient relationship. We all need to speak up and take action when legislators pretend they know what's best for women and their physicians. The American Congress of Obstetricians continues to support initiatives to assure that quality care is available to meet every woman's needs throughout her life and to guarantee a full array of clinical services are available without costly delays or the imposition of geographical, financial, attitudinal, or legal barriers. Obstetricians and gynecologists maintain the relationship with their patients throughout various stages of a woman's life, relationships based on trust and respect, where patients can share their intimate medical concerns without fear of retribution, and where the doctor and patient can develop an agreed-upon plan of care that meets the medical needs of the patient and is consistent with her values. The American Congress of Obstetricians and Gynecologists will continue to support Reproductive Health Act legislation, which guarantees that every woman can make her own personal, private health care decision, of course, especially when her health is endangered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator Krueger, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for coming and testifying. So I guess this is mostly addressed to ACOG and to family planning advocates on behalf of the Planned Parenthood clinics. So we've heard discussion of how, and I know this well, the Reproductive Health Act is not a radical bill. It's an updating of the law of New York State. We've heard of all the concerns going on in Washington, D.C. that may leave states on their own to maneuver. And we've seen, as Sabrina testified, to the bills that are passing in states all over the country that are going in the opposite direction, that are actually taking away women and their families' rights and protections. We're not Texas, but if we were Texas, what would be happening in the lives of family planning and OB-GYNs right now? Because I think it's important for people to understand what we could be facing.
Well, Texas is really what started ACOG being as vocal as they have been in the last year. And some of the legislation that is being drafted one of the most egregious is that physicians would be mandated to do the ultrasounds, have that conversation that's dictated that a legislator drafted for them. And also, OBGYNs in some states that the legislation has not passed would be able to not have to tell the woman or the patient if there is a fetal defect, if they had fear of abortion. So that is going against everything science and medical that our OBGYNs go through years and years of training in school for, to make sure that the patient and the woman has the most accurate evidence-based science information out there. And these laws would slowly erode that.
The other piece that if we were Texas that we would be seeing is the lack of access to the full range of reproductive health care and preventative health care services. Texas has passed laws and reduced funding that are devastating to women with regard to who they can access health care from, whether or not health care would be affordable. So we're talking about whether or not contraception is affordable for women. Title X is a national program that was instituted under the Nixon administration. It was bipartisan. It's one of the top 4 most successful national programs that we have to ensure access to preventative health care services and family planning. And in Texas, they have significantly limited certain trusted healthcare providers, such as Planned Parenthood, from accessing those dollars, which means their patients are unable to access healthcare on a sliding scale that was supported by the federal government. Also unable to take Medicaid as a health insurance product. So patients who are accessing healthcare out of Planned Parenthood wouldn't be able to use the health insurance that they have. And because of a lot of the cuts in funding, we're seeing a large number of providers no longer able to provide services in as many outlets as they have had in the past. So now women are having to travel significant distances to see and seek preventative healthcare services. And what we will see, and what we do know, is that unintended pregnancy will be on the rise. Women being able to use contraception for other medical concerns, fibroids, heavy periods, endometriosis, and the like, will not be able to access that medical care, and women will be, their fertility will be in jeopardy, let alone being able to use it when and whether they choose to. Whether or not they remain fertile will be called into question. We are shoulder to shoulder with ACOG as family planning providers in being utterly disappointed, borderlining disgusted with what we're seeing happening across the nation, and really, number one, politicizing basic health care, and then number two, really having legislators dictate to medical providers who have spent tens of years in training as to what would be an appropriate relationship with their patient.
Do you hear from your OB-GYN doctors, both around the country and even here in New York, even though we have better laws in many other states, how they're reacting to being told you have to provide certain kinds of procedures that you don't think are medically grounded, you can't tell women certain information about their own body and health, and I think even in 1 or 2 states that absurd law that you have to tell women false information. Right. I mean, what are the doctors saying about this?
Well, you know, in previous years, these pieces of legislation, they weren't moving. They were in the legislatures around the states, and they'd get a little play here and there, but they weren't coming out as forcefully as they are now. Our doctors are rising up. We're asking governors to veto legislation. We're drafting letters. We're in the editorials. It's one of our #1 priorities that before we were comfortable with what was going on a national level. But they're slowly eroding everything they can possibly think of, from provider care to structure of the facility to conversation that they're dictating. And ACOG is coming forward, and we're standing up and making a stand.
I mean, I'm editorializing, and I'm not a doctor, but when I read about certain states passing laws that say doctors have to tell me that my chances of getting breast cancer will increase if I make certain decisions about my reproductive health, and I'm screaming as I'm reading the piece, but that's not true.
Right. We're seeing medical evidence being dictated in legislation like never before, and that's not going on just in other states. It's going on in New York as well. When you start drafting legislation or law that dictates a conversation with a physician and his patient, you are ignoring history, and you're also ignoring future evidence-based science, and you're putting that doctor in a place of either going by the law of the land or going by the law of science, and that is something that's very scary to us.
Thank you.
We've been joined by Senator Ruth Hassel Thompson. Thank you so much, Senator Hassel Thompson. This panel, as you know, was discussing the Reproductive Health Act, and although we didn't talk about the other bills, we sort of did, because we talked about the need to be able to prevent unintended pregnancies. And Senator Krueger, you have a bill, early contraception, and we talked about people going to get access to whatever they need. And one of the bills that you also have is the bill that would not allow pharmacists who might decide that they don't want you to have contraception to make that decision. And so there are many subtexts that have not been covered, but certainly we want you all to be assured that as we look at women and the full range of reproductive health options, we are really looking at the full range of that health care. And it is really extremely important to not only have you representing the advocates and women and Sabrina, that generation that tweets and so on, and certainly the voice of our physicians who ultimately are charged with that care. So before I let them go, Senator, I wanted to ask you if you had any comment